Hi, everybody. It's Bob Rivers here, and I'm happy to report that I'm feeling better. My voice has come back, and that means I desperately need someone to talk to. So we're back with another podcast. Tonight's a very special podcast. It's one I've been meaning to do, for at least 6 or 7 years since we started recording these free things on the internet, started doing my job for free. Anyway, this is very special because joining us on this podcast tonight are two very special people that I got to work with for a period of time and be really close friends with. And one of them happens to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Steve Fossen, really the founding, they say founding bass player, but really, I think he founded the whole damn thing. Steve Fossen did. And when Heart went on to become one of the biggest bands in rock and roll history, I'll let him tell the story, but for a while he was out of the limelight, and then the passion for his music took over. He met someone very special who's also going to be on the podcast with us tonight. But before we bring them on, let's say hi to Spike O'Neill.
Howdy, Bob.
How are you?
I see you. I'm good, and you look wonderful. I'm really, really glad to see your face, and I think the Trump spray on tan is a little much, but you look good. So that, believe it or not, is sitting in the hot tub here in Vegas every day for an hour or so. That's real sun. Wow, I wouldn't know. I'm in Seattle, and we haven't seen it in 5 months. So
your face is whiter than your beard. Yeah. All right. So, in addition
to my lineage,
in addition to Steve Fossen, we're going to talk to Somar Macek. Look, we're all old friends. How do you feel about having this conversation tonight?
With Somar and Steve, long overdue, and it's weird. It's like I was thinking about this when you asked me to take part in this podcast tonight. It's like I get to talk to literally some of the greatest living musicians on the face of the earth. But then again, I'm just going to chat with some friends I've known for decades and shoot the breeze. So it's weird. It's you feel like you should be in awe of the talent and the experiences that we're going to get to share. But then again, it's like people I like to chew a steak with, so it's all good.
So we're going to try and do this a little differently than the typical rock history. All of these people and who was in the band from this year to that year.
In 1973, you were arrested for smuggling gerbils into Afghanistan.
Exactly.
You want to tell us how that affected the recording schedule for your live album?
But I have to say this: there is so much amazing history and storytelling that we better get going right now. Because first off, Steve's one of the greatest living rock musicians of all time, but time is ticking. Steve Fossen, how are you?
Yes, Bob. I'm here.
All right, good. By the way, I asked you to please send some stuff so that we could prepare. And I went through every bit of it, and you sent a treasure trove of rock history from the beginnings of Heart, some probably very rare photos that throughout this podcast, I know Mike is going to show them to us. And Somar, are you there too? All right.
I'm here.
Steve and Somar are husband and wife, for those of you that may be new or not from Seattle. And they tour in a band called Heart by Heart, which is really the guts, the heartbeat of the original Heart, with Steve Fossen and Mike Derosier. And again, I don't want to get all the rock history in here, but I have to. There's some people in Detroit and Massachusetts who are listening who will want to know that. So, and you two are roughly the same age. Is that right?
You're spot on. Not a day in between us.
I think your shirts were bought on the same day, Bob. That's about where it ends.
Yeah. All right. I don't know how to start, so I'll start with you, Steve. So back, when did Magic Man come out?
Well, in Canada, 1975. In America, 1976.
Really? If I may ask, I know you guys built a following in Canada and America when you were getting the band established and building an audience. Why did Canada get it first? I'm a little pissed off right now.
Well, Roger Ann and I emigrated to Canada back in 1972, and we reconvened our band, Heart, and we got really popular in the Vancouver area, and we came to the attention of Mike Flicker of Mushroom Records, and we did a demo for him in early 75, and then by the spring and summer and fall of 1975, we were making Dreamboat Annie in Canada at Mushroom Studios up in Vancouver. And the record company was based in Canada also. And of course, that was their first goal, was to get the record play in.
Would it be safe to say that the Canadian label favored Canada, that they just wanted to release it, or maybe they didn't have the oomph to get it out all over like you plowed your way to success by being super popular in the clubs, right?
Yeah, and of course in Canada they have this thing called Canadian content, and if you qualify, then radio stations in Canada are obligated to put you on rotation, at least put Canadian artists on rotation at least a third of the time.
And they were so thrilled to have something instead of Anne Murray to play that year.
Well, there's some great Canadian bands that were popular at the same time. But what happened with Heart was they, like you guys probably did when you were younger, they had shootouts where there'd be a couple of new bands and maybe three bands, and they'd play each song, and then people would call in and vote which song they liked
on the radio. Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and Magic Man was just tearing it up all across Canada, and winning those shootouts all over the place. And of course, those pesky radio waves, they don't stop at the border. They don't have to check in with customs or immigration or anything. They just keep going. And then people from the United States, especially in places like Detroit and the northern states, would hear Heart. And then we got interest in that respect in America. And a band called Rush. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute.
You know what?
They were around in 2013 too, weren't they? Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were kind enough to allow us to open up for them for a couple of shows down in America. And one was in Detroit, one was in St. Louis. Detroit was, of course, Detroit's a huge rock town. And we played the Purina Dome in St. Louis. And so, and it was, not only was it cool to hang out with Rush a little bit, but for them to allow us and give us the opportunity to open up for them was very gracious of them. And it really showed us, and they, just by the way they were to us, it taught us how to be to other people too. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, they were inducted the same year as you into the Rock and Roll Hall.
Yeah, they were. Same show.
Yeah. Blah, blah, blah.
So that must have felt like just serendipity times 10.
Well, so to answer my question about why Canada got you guys first, they deserved it. I mean, I had never realized that I knew that you guys had ties to stop it. My dog agrees. My dog hates Canada, but it's okay. So Canada's dedication to Canadian music really opened the door for you guys. For America. They got you in front of our ears.
That's
so
right.
I'll always think more of Canada than I did yesterday after this.
There's another side to this story as well, though. And by the way, those old pictures are just wonderful. There's one picture, and this has got to be you around high school age, that you sent that says, join the Army. And
that was our high school.
Army, right? Yeah. Now, knowing a little bit of Heart history as I do, did you ever consider calling the band Draft Dodgers? The Draft Dodgers?
As a matter of fact, no.
No. Well, how about
they just went with Dodgers? They got sued by the ball club, right?
Yeah. How about the Bone Spurs? That worked for Donald Trump. Anyway,
Jesus.
No, there's the aspect of this is why you were in Canada, and then feel free to
Well, Roger's older brother, Mike, he was the only guy that actually got called up and had, and rather than serve, he decided to go to Canada, which, there a lot of people did that.
Yeah.
It was a decision of your conscience, and, you can't fault a guy for that.
I would have done what you did. It would say, well, okay, let's go together. Was it a hard decision at the time? Did he bring it in front of everyone? Because you were all like a family at that time. And he was, of course, the magic man dating Anne, and you were wisely not dating anybody in the band. It's one of those smartest things, probably.
Yeah, I will never date anybody in the band.
Well, you would have to marry them first, yes. But I mean, it's an interesting story, but I've never heard how did it feel deciding to leave the United States? And you're giving me some of it because some of it was passionately pro-peace, anti-war. Yeah.
Well, by that time, the war was... Okay, so in 72, the war was going pretty strong still. And I don't know if you guys remember or were around Seattle at that time, but they had a huge billboard that was several billboards around the town that said, well, the last person out, please turn off the lights, because the war had just sucked all the energy and money out of Seattle. And Mike, he had been up in Vancouver for a couple of years by that point. And he said, hey, you guys should come up here. Vancouver's doing great. It was one of the few times in history when the Canadian dollar was worth more than the American dollar. So we were down here struggling away, and, we thought, what can we lose? I mean, a lot of people pull up their roots and go someplace else to make it big. And, we thought, hey, we'll give it a try. And so we went through all the steps necessary to get successfully emigrated up there, which is, it's not an easy process, but it's not, they don't make it as hard as getting from Mexico up here.
You have to operate a chainsaw correctly, right? Get Canadian citizenship. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Or make maple syrup.
And by the way,
you had to wear a flannel shirt. That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And if you swim from Blaine to Point Roberts, you're still in the United States. That's not.
But anyway,
fascinating. And that's really interesting because, it's hard. It's easy to get. It's easy to lose the memory of the Vietnam War and how that polarized an entire generation.
Yeah.
And how we spoke up for what we believed in. So that's part of the hard story as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
was Mike
nice?
Yeah. Was Mike managing you guys then, Steve?
Well, when we first moved back to Canada, yeah, he took over the reins. But Raj and I had been down here for 2 or 3 years managing ourselves, and while he was up there. And then when he met Anne and they became an item, and then he suggested that we emigrate up there. Well, of course, Anne was all in with that. And Raj and I thought, what the heck? And the rest of the band, we had a few other American members in the band at that time, and they said, hey, no, we're not going to Canada. What for? And Raj and I, we didn't really question it because we thought, well, things down here are, we've gotten to a certain point down in America. Let's give Canada a try. And like I said, Canada was booming. Vancouver is like the Los Angeles equivalent of Los Angeles of Canada. It's the West Coast city, And
did you guys have a following in the States that you're worried about losing, or did you visit them often, or what? How'd it work?
Well, yeah, we had a following down here, but we thought, we knew we'd be back at some point in some way.
At what point, Steve, did you have an inkling that what you were in was going to become huge? Was it early on? Like everybody wanted to be a rock star back then, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and countless others, Led Zeppelin, were such powerful forces for a culture, a generation, humanity, and everybody wanted to play a guitar. Not all of us did it, and very few got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But what was your motivation? Like, did you just know you were a musician from birth? Like, I was born a DJ, or did you, what started it all?
Well, pretty much. When I was really young, I was very drawn to music, and my parents, they had drinking buddies that we go to their house, and they had one of those organs with a couple of, the two-tiered keyboards, and to get me to quit bugging them, while they were drinking, they would say, "Hey, go play the organ, do whatever, get out of our hair." So I could pick out melodies on the organ when I was just a little kid. And, I sang in the choir at school and really enjoyed singing, especially the Christmas songs at the time. And I was really drawn to the rock music at the time, the Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison, Ricky Nelson, Elvis, of course, and the girl singers too. But there were girls before Ann and Nancy came along. That?
I remember one or three. Yeah.
Yeah. So and all that music was really magical to all of us. Because it was so new and so vital at the time. And there was such a great just from one end of the spectrum to the other. All things were accepted. You could have a doo-wop all the way to Frank Sinatra was even on the charts back then.
In fact, AOR, the nickname for album-oriented rock, was all over the road. You could be as creative as you wanted to be. You could do anything. Yeah, what a time. And now, but back to is there a moment you remember, like, is it standing on stage in front of 100,000 people? When's the moment where you say, hey, this is pretty big?
Well, staying on stage in front of 100 people is like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. For most musicians, it's like a coffee shop with 30 people. But you know what I mean, though. Okay,
So this is I'm going to make a little bit longer story out of it than you're probably asking. But when Roger and I met, we were in junior high school because we homeroom. He was an F, I was an F, so we were in homeroom together. And we just became friends, and we both had
F was not your grade point average.
That's what I was wondering too.
What was F?
Fossen.
Actually,
Fossen and Fisher. Okay, thank you.
Actually, I had in ninth grade, I had a very, very good teacher, and she sat me down and she had faith in me, and she tutored me a little bit. And that year, I ended up getting a 4-point.
Nice.
I didn't know that.
Where did it go? What happened?
Where did this come from?
I was on the National Honor Society of America.
Really? So naturally you fled to Canada.
This is not surprising to me, by the way, because you're quite the intellectual. I mean, we'll let Somar refute that later, but you read, books about Greek philosophers and history, and you're actually, you got a lot of depth to you, but we only have 40 minutes left, so let's not get into it.
Okay, so I'm going to...
Here we go. Continue with your story. Yes, you and Roger.
So Roger and I, we talked about music. We dreamt about music. We thought, we got to do this, we got to do that. And we just talked about it. And then when we finally got to high school, everybody around us was getting instruments. This guy would get a set of drums. That guy would get a bass. That guy would get a guitar. This guy was playing keyboards. This guy was a singer, blah, blah, blah. And Roger and I were going like, hey, we better do something, catch up with these guys. So he got a guitar, I got a bass. And for the next 2 years, we didn't hardly hang out together at all. I had a band, he had a band. When we were seniors in high school, one day both of our bands had disbanded somehow, and we were walking home from Inglemoor High School to my house. And on the way home, we talked about it. And we got to my dad's house, went to his office downstairs. We shook hands. We said, let's make a band. We're not stopping until we make it big.
Wow. To the toppermost of the poppermost.
Well, that was our inspiration.
Yeah.
We heard that John and Paul did that too. So that's what we did. And so we just, put all of our energy into making music. And
that's a great story. And that's the answer to the question. So you and Roger got together for this purpose. Like what was the moment where you said, we're going to make it big? And it was with the handshake.
Yeah, but there's more.
Do tell.
There's more. So
we'll be speaking with Somar Macek next week, but we're going to keep going with Steve.
Yeah.
So we had made Dreamboat Annie, and it was being successfully played all across Canada.
Yes.
We were still playing clubs at the time, and we got hired by a club in Edmonton, Alberta called the Inferno. We showed up on Monday. We played Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we just the owner did not appreciate what we were doing at all. So Thursday night after we got
So you're at a club that hates a future Hall of Fame band.
Yes.
That was a great memory.
And that was the version of Heart that had Howard Leese and Mike Derosier in it at the same time too. So there was Nancy, Howard, Mike, Roger, and I. And who's the singer now? Oh, Ann. And ha ha ha. So we got fired basically. So Mike and
in the middle of a gig.
No, the Thursday night was over, but he said, don't come back tomorrow night. I got another band for the weekend. You guys are not fitting in. So we went back to the hotel room, and Mike and Derosier and Howard were looking at us like, well, we just joined this band, and the first thing you do is get fired from the first gig we play. And so we were all moping around thinking, oh gosh, felt really bad. And then we got a ring-a-ding-ding-ding, a phone call, So it was a record company, Shelley Siegel. He says, any way you guys can get out of the gig this weekend? We said, well, as a matter of fact, we just got fired. He says, good. So they booked us on a plane or a train, the Scenic Cruiser, to go from Edmonton to Montreal to open up for Rod Stewart and the Faces. So we get to Montreal. We have a great day in Montreal. We have crepes. And so we get on stage, do our sound check, go back to the dressing room. We come back out, looking around. The place is sold out. It's like 15, 18,000 people, right? So we're all going like, gosh, I wonder if they know anything about our band. So the very first song that we played was Magic Man. And when Magic Man was over, you would not believe the cheer that we got. People just went nuts, and it
had already been on the radio enough that you started with your Stairway to Heaven. You just led off with the big hit.
And remember, people used to light the lighters and hold them up. Mm-hmm. The whole place was lit up. Yeah. And I was sitting on
Remember
stage.
When open flame was encouraged in public places? That's a few decades
and I was
ago.
on stage, and I was thinking to myself, okay, this is it. This is it. We've done it. We've done it. There's no going back now. We're on our way.
So starting with the handshake, and then that's the moment you knew it would work. And after that, I looked through some of the pictures. Was it your own private jet for a while, or was that just a lease back?
We had a couple of prop jets. We had a King Air and a Grumman G1.
Yeah. Nothing says you made it like your own air taxi, right? It's just freaking awesome. Yeah. Is the largest audience you ever played for the one I read about in Los Angeles, like over 400,000 people? Yeah.
Ontario Speedway, yeah.
What's that like?
CalGen too. Well, it's a sea of people, and it's almost. Even at big concerts, you can still pick out an individual here and an individual there, But this was just like a sea of people that went back. You couldn't even. At the end of I don't even know why people would go to that, because they were so far back that what do they see? What do they hear? But
sound systems back then were not nearly what they are.
Well, they had tiered We had a sound system on stage, and then another one, 50 yards.
They were there because they loved you and they loved the hits, the songs that were being played on the radio. And they just, I know this because back then I was a huge fan. And when I say this, I was like, how old was I? 76. I was like 20 years old in radio. And when Magic Man came out, and seriously, to this day, and I think I've told you this, it's one of my favorite songs of all time. In fact, it's odd. If I had to make a list of 10 songs, Magic Man would be on it, Roundabout would be on it. And then later in life, I get to meet these incredible people who put the records together. So, I mean, Magic Man was so huge. And the people, the throngs of sweaty people out there just wanting a piece of you, Steve, which brings up a memory I cannot erase from my mind, which is a certain photo of you where, well, your nipples were out there for everybody to see.
Yes.
And you know that Mike's grabbing that photo right now. Was that a one-time thing? Or was that a regular? I never asked you this.
Oh, I wore it for a few gigs.
Oh, you did? Okay, cool.
Yeah. And remember I told you about the show in Montreal?
Yes.
That's where I bought it at a thrift shop that day.
The thinking behind it was let's leave a lasting imprint.
Well,
hold on a minute. I got to ask this.
Yeah.
Did you buy it for that gig? You got fired on a Thursday. You're opening up for Rod Stewart and Faces on Friday. Let's fly some nipple. Did you wear it at that first gig? Oh my God.
I love it.
That is balls.
Now, I've seen that picture for years, and I never asked you about it because I always thought, well, that was just one weird night, and someone said, try this. But I'd love to know the story behind it. That's really, and tell me this also. If you can remember, because, I could barely remember what I ate a few hours ago, but when you see that sea of 400,000 people and you're backstage before you go on, you guys were fantastic musicians, and there was no doubt you were going to be awesome. But are you nervous?
Of course, yeah. And but like I said, for the first 3 years after we emigrated to Canada, we were a very popular band. So we played 4, 5, 6 nights a week for like 2 years in a row. So we really honed our stuff. And we were very, very confident in being able to, present our music. And it was kind of like riding a bike, you just go up there and it's like, okay, so here's where you play this and everything, But I got some very important information from our road manager, Dick Adams. And he said, just remember, when you're standing up there in front of 300,000 people, 400,000 people, you're playing to one person at a time, basically. So if that one person likes you, then they all like you.
Wonderful stuff. We're about halfway through, and we could talk about the history of Heart forever. Because there's so many stories. There's a great book. I like Anne's book. Did you like her book? Kicking and Dreaming? Yeah. Well, no, Somar or anybody.
You read it, Steve?
No.
No, we have.
I haven't. I didn't read it.
You didn't read it?
No.
Oh. Okay.
I got a story.
Someone read it to you at bedtime, but you fell asleep every night.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
I got a story about that.
Okay.
So our publicist, he said, "Oh, there's a book on Heart out there. I think I'll pick it up." So he picked it up, and he started reading it. And the first half of the book is pretty much deals with the history of Heart and the history of this and that. And then it gets into the Ann and Nancy part. And I swear to God, he chucked it in the garbage and said, I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I had met you, and from the moment I met you, I thought you were a very interesting cat. So I wanted to hear, I didn't follow all of the, all the comings and goings of all of that. And I wanted to read it. And I knew it was one perspective. But it did help me to understand the whole, because there's monstrous talent all throughout this. And, and egos in rock are legendary, and bands that have had people in and out of relationships, Fleetwood Mac comes to mind. It's a really common thing. Anyway, you can read about all of this stuff in a number of spots, but I want to fast forward to today-ish, like the last couple of decades, the last decade or so, because Steve, after Heart, and again, you can read about all that in other places, after Heart, for a while, would you say you were not a recluse, but you moved away from music for a while and hiked and studied and worked? And what happened after Heart until this magic person comes into your life who's standing by?
Well, I started hiking. I'd gotten into some hang out with the wrong people, doing the wrong things, and I
read about that all throughout rock and roll history.
Yes.
So you joined a country band?
There was a lawnmower that ended up in a pool. I remember reading that, but that's not this time. Yes.
It had to do with, substances like alcohol and
those
substances.
I'm nostalgic already.
And one day I was driving home at 8:00 in the morning. It was a summer day. It was very hot at 8, driving across the 520 bridge, the sun right in my eyes. And I'm thinking to myself, if I keep this up, I'm not going to last very much longer. So I got home, got some sleep, or whatever you want to call it. And I decided right then and there, something's got to change. So a really good friend of mine, Don King, and I said, hey, you want to go for a hike? So what we did was we hiked up to Wallace Falls out there on the Highway 2. And we said, let's do it in spring, summer, fall, and winter. See what that's like. And that just turned into, I became like a fanatic hiker. And I got, snowshoes and a backpack and a tent and a sleeping bag. And we just went nuts for years.
From dope to dopamine. It's a great story.
Yeah. And it got me out of that scene and into something totally different. And, like when you play music, it's all about who sees you play. People come and see. But when you're out hiking, there's nobody sees you do it. Nobody knows that, gee, if I'd have made one little wrong step there, I'd be down 40 feet on my noggin on a solid rock cliff, But I survived that too.
And you are a reader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, but keep it brief because most people don't read.
Well, I got a book called, there's something to do with how the West, all the battles that happened in the West that kept the West Christian, right? Because there was all these battles where if they would have lost, another religion would have been taken over.
I didn't. And what was that runner-up religion?
Let me think. It has something to do with the Middle East.
Oh, this is history.
And, there was a bunch of battles where I don't know, Providence or whatever just came through and helped the West be the West and the East be the East.
And reading about history like that and comparing it with the world we live in today, do we keep rerunning the same battles over and over again as a species?
Well, I mean, that's the one thing that happens when you read history is that people that don't read history think they're making the history, doing the same thing that was done 200 years ago, all over again. So, and then I got into leadership, and I started studying the different leaders And, there's all these different leadership styles that happen. And I've gravitated towards, leadership styles that were, that were inclusive.
Wow, this is fascinating because my first impression of you, around that time we started to be friends, we went hiking. You gave me a really thick book, which I read about an eighth of before I went, this is really heavy and deep, but I'm super impressed that you read it. And then with Heart by Heart, and I'll maybe let Somar tell a little bit of that story, but with Heart by Heart, I'll say this from my heart. You were the leader. You were clearly the guy who, brought all these talented people together with a clear mission to play, first off, to reclaim your heritage, the records that you'd made, in a way that would connect you with people, maybe not 400,000 sweaty people, but I've seen a few thousand sweaty people in front of you. And you put together, and some of it has to be the luck that, that fate that brought you and Somar together, but you put together the ultimate, and it's not a tribute band, it's a spin-off band technically because it has the original rhythm section, but it's more than a spin-off band because it's authentic to what it would have been like in 1976 to see Heart live, with the original rhythm section. And of course, the amazingly talented Somar Macek, who I will ask to tell me, if she would, how you met Steve Fossen, and just, in the small amount of time we have, how this band came together.
Well, we met at a party with a bunch of other big names like Alan White. Obviously, there was Roger Fisher and Mike Derosier and Steve Fossen of Heart there. Randy Hansen, Goldie McJohn. I mean, we could go on and on. So this party, they needed a singer, and they found me and Catherine Ice, who's well known around in the Pacific Northwest area. She contacted me to sing at this party, and they wanted a couple of Heart songs. So I'm like, all right, let's do it. For the time being, I'd been in another Heart tribute band.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, so I show up at this party. They pounced on
you as soon as they heard you sing, as I recall.
They did.
But they couldn't compete.
So so I go to this party, and I'm one of those fan people. A friend of mine had gifted me a Heart album. It was Dog and Butterfly. So I brought it with me and had Steve and Roger sign it. I had already met Derosier at a bar. So I wasn't all like starstruck over him that night. But with Steve, I always say it wasn't love at first sight. I mean, I went there to sing and not to hook up. So that's what we did. We just, shook hands, and then we ended up hanging out through mutual friends after that night. And long story short, we would just be together as a duo. He would play bass. I would sing Heart songs, just two of us. And through parties and family gatherings, we kind of just started Heart by Heart, being the two of us falling in love. And then we got gig opportunities. We had a Susan G. Komen benefit was our first actual show with Randy Hansen. So it was the four of us. And it just built from there. I mean, being contacted by agents, and I don't know. I mean, I could elaborate a lot more, but I think that's mainly the gist of
just a happenstance coming together at a party.
Exactly.
And
I wasn't the kid having a crush on Steve Fossen, especially in his nipple outfit.
Which
he still has.
He still has that? Oh yeah.
I can go get it.
Yeah, we'll talk to Somar. No, we don't have enough time. And by the way, I know you long enough to know that's really the true story. It's just, it wasn't like you were a fan. You were a singer. You loved Heart. You were in a Heart tribute band before, and you started singing with them. And then, so it didn't even develop right away. You just started playing together for fun. At some point, there must have been a twinkle in Steve's eye. At some point, Steve.
Yeah,
I think I could see the twinkle now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, with the closer we got as friends, the more I realized that she's she was a smart person. I had a lot of respect for her and her family, and she was very driven, and that's one thing that you have to have when you're in a partnership is you have to both be driven. You can't, one person can't be an anchor and the other person be the Maserati. And
but now, be honest, you wanted to marry me right away. If you had your way.
Can I say something? Because I think you've talked to me about this at one point. You were very respectful. Obviously, she was, HOT and all of that stuff, but you were, in the beginning at least, very respectful, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were like, yeah.
And her family is, is traditional. I wouldn't say old school, but they're traditional. And we needed to get the permission to get married and all that kind of stuff. And it was a hard one too, because of the age difference.
Really?
Wow, I thought we were only a day apart.
You were the same age.
No, I mean, that was the biggest factor in this whole thing. I mean, it was, here's this young girl. She's all of a sudden fallen for this quite a bit older gentleman. I mean, granted, the oldest that I had dated, a guy was 10 and a half years older. And at that point, it was like shocking to my family. Like, what is happening here? Right. But to be, I'm not even going to say how many more years. People know. If you know,
3 years older. Yeah.
It's shocking to my parents who are like, okay, so is it just going to be a dating thing? Or now they're talking about getting married? Is this going to last? I mean, there's a lot of questioning going on. What is his history like? There was so much to deal with. And then we're like, okay, if we can make it through this and be strong and, we prayed a lot. We just, everything, if it's going to work out, it's going to work out. And it did. So, and we're still here today kicking it.
Yeah. And how long have you been married now? It's got to be
8 years.
8 years, close to a decade. And having known you through that first, when I think you guys were just somewhat newly together, and I rode in a limo with you, I remember, in Aberdeen for some concert, something we were doing down there.
We did, and we went and looked at the Kurt Cobain
on the
site.
River Wishkah. Yep. Is that what it's called?
Under the bridge, under the bridge.
Yeah, we hung out there.
Yeah.
And I had all those same thoughts that your parents had. I was like, all right. And but here's the thing, having got to know you guys over probably 4 years after that, you are meant for each other. I mean, first off, folks, if you go see Heart by Heart on stage, Somar and Steve are super funny together. You have this, Steve, you and I talked about this the other day. It's a sort of a subtle lost art form of humor. People like to hit each other over the head now. But, Smothers Brothers, who else did I mention when I think of you?
Burns and Allen.
Burns and Allen, yes.
Sonny and Cher.
You're Gracie in that scenario, but no, I'm kidding. Sonny and Cher, and there used to be this thing where even if they were brothers, where these couples have this wry sense of humor together, and you guys do have that. Yeah, I mean, it's anyone who knows you, if people first meet you, maybe even still today, it's like, oh yeah, well, he's got that. Like I know when I see it, who's the rock star now with the hottest youngest bride? Oh shoot, in the news recently, I can't remember who. Anyway, I just went.
They all do, Bob. There's like 50 of them.
The ones with castles, yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a tribute. So it's a tribute to you two in this spinoff that it just really like, your original handshake with Roger, that this was meant to be. And you have done such a brilliant job of performing the music. And, I got to play parts with you for a couple of years when you were first.
I was going to ask about that dark period of the band's history. If I could.
Well,
yeah. Well, no, I will say this about your age, if I may. Steve, I have never met anybody of your generation that is more like a little kid than you are. And music, when you perform for a living, I've heard that every minute on stage really you don't clock it. It doesn't count. It's like skipping time when you can be on stage. And I think the fact that you've been on stage for so much of your life, you're not somebody who toiled away and had their job wear them down to a nub. Most people who are your chronological number are much, much, much older than you. I think that's maybe why you guys are so well suited for each other.
Yeah. And, Somar never lets me forget my, the child that's in me still.
Yeah.
And that child, if you want to be creative and have fun and have a good life, I mean, you want that childhood wonder and excitement to be there in some form or another all the time.
And that's, by the way,
obviously sometimes I can't be.
Yeah, but you bring that to the heart music too. You perform it as if it's brand new.
Yeah, it's 75, 76.
Yeah. Well, that's what we learned when we were kids. You got to, every night's a new night. You want to make the gig you're doing right now better than the gig you did last night. So.
And you guys are performing at performing arts centers all over the country now. Have you gone to Canada?
We have not. No, I'd love to go to Canada.
You should go to that club.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
We should.
You should just buy it from that guy and close it down or something.
Well, actually, when we're in Cabo, there's a couple that we know down at Cabo that they're from Calgary, and they say, no, I don't think it's around anymore. So I'm still around, but they're not.
Yeah.
We're only going to go if you bust out that outfit, that top.
All of that is interesting history. And by the way, there's an amazing article that I want to refer everybody to, written by Christopher Sanford of the Seattle Times. And I think it's one of the best things ever written about Heart. And it's about Steve Fossen primarily. But it tells the whole story in a way you won't get from Ann's book. But it's really good perspective. And do you have pictures of Christopher with farm animals or something? Because it's such a nice article. And really all true, by the way.
Yeah. We met Chris a couple of years back. I mean, I think the first time he saw us was at the Everett Theater.
Okay. So he's a fan of the modern Heart by Heart.
But he had seen and was a big fan of Heart well before that. And he tells this story about him and his buddy were in Detroit driving around in an old clunker car. And they were aimlessly driving around, and then the radio was on and Magic Man came on, and they slammed on the brakes, pulled over and went, "What the hell was that?" And that was Chris's introduction to Heart, and he's loved us ever since.
That article tells the whole story very well, especially about the beginning part of Heart, and the various different names that you had, and the whole. You open up a lot about your feelings afterwards, but how crazy, how amazing did it feel in 2013? And I want to ask you how you heard. Did you get a call? However it happened. But before I finish framing the question is, how amazing was it that the original rock lineup of Heart is who was inducted? I mean, there's got to be a competitive part of you that says, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and at the time, none of us knew the whole protocol with how the Rock Hall chooses who's going to get inducted and who's not going to get inducted and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that more people were going to get involved with the induction too, but they just went with the original band, which was, what do you say? I mean, what are you going to say? Oh, well, no, you can't,
Well, it's amongst music critics pretty widely accepted that the 80s were, not the most creative time for the band. And so, look, there's a lot of things the Rock Hall of Fame does. I was going to ask you who you were in favor of this year. But there's a lot that they do that comes into question from time to time about what's rock. But in this case, they, and I feel bad, by the way. If I was the bass player from the 80s, I don't even know his fucking name. I would feel bad if I was him, right? Who is he? Well, let's not say. I'm just teasing. And I wouldn't want to see, here's the thing. I love everybody. I love it. And I wouldn't want anybody to feel bad. Anybody who's ever been in the band should feel a little bit about, excited that you're all in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Someone should tell Nancy that there was 4 guys that helped make the whole thing happen.
We're getting into the good stuff now. The skeptics won't have got this far, but the true believers are loving it. Well, it was an amazing time. So let me re-ask this part of the question. Where were you when you heard? What was that moment like?
Okay, well, we were nominated 2 years in a row. So the first year that we were nominated, I had just dropped Somar off at work. I was driving home and they played Owner of a Lonely Heart, which of course that's Alan White, a good friend of ours. And we all knew him and loved him at the time. And he was a great guy. And then when that song was over and they said, oh, we got some news in the rock world. Hart was nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame today. And I was driving the car and I went, what? And I just about drove off the road. And so I got home and made some phone calls and kind of figured out what being nominated is not the same as being inducted. And they have this kind of fan call-in thing that happens. And so I was, you can ask Somar, I was a nervous wreck for the 6 months leading up until the announcement.
And this was the second or third nomination that you got?
The first.
This was the first.
This was the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nervous wreck, not sleeping. He was out of his mind, just like, oh, this is the greatest thing,
And then, of course, we didn't make it the first year.
Uh-oh. Did you have to console him, Somar? How bad was it?
Well, I took it like a man.
He did. And by the second nomination, then actually being inducted, he was completely chilled because he'd already known, like, okay, this is what could happen. He was calm.
Yeah, so I didn't really pay attention. So I think Somar was at work or something, and I was home, and I was downstairs. And you've been to my downstairs, I think, Bob. And I was fooling around with.
Or did I see it on the Hoarders TV program? I can't remember which.
Oh,
you got it. and so I was fooling around with my Ampeg amp and my Fender bass, and I was all like swearing at it and cussing and trying to make it sound good and everything. And the phone rings. And it's a trustee from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And they say, oh, you made it. I said, made what? He says, you're in. I said, in what? You're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. and then it hit me. And I could, and after that I went, and I could barely speak after that. And of course, the first person I called was, of course, Somar. And
and she said, you made what?
I think we both cried a little bit. We both cried a little bit.
You made the bed? What?
I made it. Good for you, finally.
And and then, it was, one thing led to another, and we had a super fun time leading up to the induction. And our really good friend of ours, Barrett, flew us down to LA in his private jet. And we had limousines picking us up at the airport, and we went to the Ritz-Carlton, and every half hour or so somebody knocked on the door with a box of chocolates or a bag of fruit or some flowers or whatever, And
it was great. It was a great time, and I got to be there. And
we thought we were pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember when Roger Fisher called me and said, "I'd like to invite you to come and see me inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." Well, that was so nice. And he sent me a link to buy my own tickets. So that, I thought he was giving me a ticket. Anyway, it remains one of my favorite nights of my whole career, just to be your friends and see that happen. And yeah, wonderful. And it's great to have this conversation. You can see Heart by Heart all over the country. Just go to their website, heartbyheart.com. Heart by Heart is Somar Macek, Lizzy Daymont on guitar, she's amazing. Chad Quist, who is fantastic. I don't really know him because I moved away, but just
who's that kid you got drumming now, man? He's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that straggler,
Derosier went to a home and they found a lookalike, just like the Saddam lookalikes from Desert Storm. And Mike Derosier and Steve Fossen, who really are, and if you've never seen them, you'll feel this. They are I remember sitting in Mark Nafisi's living room one time, one of the first times I saw you guys play, and I heard the drums and the bass. And I just went, oh, I've never heard anything sound that much like Heart since the records in the 70s. So good. Spike, last word, and then Somar and Steve.
Well, I think when I started with this whole thing, as a kid listening to the radio, Steve, to be able to actually get to meet you and then, play with you and then call you a friend. It's the weirdest of two worlds. I am literally starstruck every time I'm in your presence, but I don't know of a better guy I've ever met doing any walk. I could be popping rivets at Boeing and you're still a better guy than him. So, and it's a thrill to know you guys, to watch you guys, and just to call you friends.
Yeah. Thank you. Same thing for both of you. Bob, thanks for always, all the airtime you gave to Steve and the guys when they got nominated and for their induction. I mean, that's all really appreciated, and we sure enjoyed having you in Heart by Heart for the short amount of time. And Spike, I always looked up to you, and I love you both. I'm glad we're friends.
Yeah.
And all right, Bob Newhart, you get the last word.
Okay, so this is kind of off subject a little bit, but I remember back that Spike and the Impalers would play on the plaza at the stadium before the Seahawk football games. And 2 years in a row, you had Somar and I join you. And the first year that we joined you, the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. The second year, they went to the Super Bowl, but unfortunately they didn't win, but they still went to the Super Bowl. And they haven't gone to the Super Bowl since. And
they haven't had us back.
Are you forgetting part of the story, Steve?
Huh?
There's a memento from that occasion that you've been meaning to give back to Spike.
Oh yeah,
that's where it is.
Yeah,
you left that at the second, and I picked it up. We picked it up and said, "Oh, this is Spike." So we hauled it around all day. Yeah, we'll give it back to Spike when we see him next time. Well,
12 years later, I took the liberty, Spike, of saying that Melissa wouldn't mind if another memento didn't get to your house.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I don't think there's any room left in my house where it's in a better place. So that. All
right, everybody. Thanks very much for listening to this podcast. It's good to be back. And check out Heart by Heart at heartbyheart.com and go see those guys perform. Be well, everybody.
Did you guys rehearse for the hall show?
They did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
How'd it go? Was it awkward?
Well, yeah, it was awkward.
Anything else, Somar? Did you have fun? I know we could have got into more comedy.
We could go on and on about whatever, but if you wanted me to talk about Steve all night.
Yeah. Steve, could you have put together the band if Somar hadn't walked into your life?
Yeah.
And no.
No.
I was so looked over at you and Derosier and went, all I have to do is play what's on the record. Oh, look who's here.
Hey, Lisa.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hi.
I went to see the Australian Bee Gees.
Ooh, how was that?
It had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of production and licensing from the Bee Gees of original video footage and everything. And all I could do was look at the lead singer and think, he's miserable. He's up here going, how did my life end up doing this? Two shows a night, 5 nights a week. The Sphere, I'll give some of it away. At one point, they show the walls, and the walls can be anything. You can feel like you're in a spaceship going through the Milky Way. You can feel like you're on a ship, and they can rock it, and you feel the motion. The chairs have Jeff Cathan's favorite thing, which is the butt kicker in every chair. 18,000 seats. So they can shake your rectum in there.
The Dead's playing their residency next month, and
Yeah.
no one's going to need acid for the first time ever. They're not going to need it. It's going to be great.
Yes, you used to have to eat acid to get that. That is exactly right.
Yeah.
Anyway, and we're live.
I got to go, guys.
You too.
I got to drive my kid back to college.
Bye.
Good seeing you guys.
Thanks,
Even
bye.
in the middle of the walk.
Yeah.
Good to see you,
You
man.
bet. Talk to you soon, guys.
All right.
Thanks.
So anyway, just so good to see you guys. I actually thought about doing this for a long time, and just wanted-
And gotta go. How do I get out of here? Drop me, Mike. Help me.
No.
Help me.
No.